Hey, good morning. This is Jamie with Stonemaier Games, and today is January 8th, 2020. I'm joining you right now if you're on Facebook Live. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast in the future, well, welcome, and feel free to post your comments on YouTube. YouTube is the best place to post comments after this thing is done. I woke up with a really bad headache this morning, like at 4 a.m., that type of migraine out of nowhere. So I'm going to be a little more low-key, I think, this morning as I try to work past this thing. But I'm happy to be here with you. I'm happy to answer your questions, and I do have some little fun topics to talk about today. No giant news, but just some fun little things. Let's start. I think today's chocolate of the day might actually be the same as last week because I'm still working on it. But I'll show that off first. Yeah, it's this Choco Love almonds and sea salt and dark chocolate. This is one of my favorite fancy chocolate brands. It's so good. They have it at Whole Foods and some of the local grocery stores here in St. Louis. Really, really good stuff. So that is my chocolate of the day. And it ties into my New Year's resolution, which is to not buy sweets, which I'm sure will not last the entire year, but I'm going to see how long I can make it without buying sweets. But I bought this before January 1st. So found a little loophole there in deciding my resolution before the new year started. So that was fun. What else is going on today other than eating chocolate? We have two play tests today. So normally on Wednesday, I meet with Alan, my co-founder, and we do a play test. We meet and just discuss business things. We usually meet once a week. But today, two things are different about it. One, Joe, our new full-time employee, Joe is going to be joining us for the first time at our combined weekly meeting on Wednesdays. And I'll talk about more about Joe in a second. And the other thing is we're doing two play tests. We have two games that are in various stages of play testing, and both of them just happen to be ready. Normally we'd spread them out from week to week. Both of these have a little bit of not urgency to them, but I'm eager to get them to the table and eager to move on to the next step of play testing if they're at a good place right now. So we have a longer meeting today, two play tests. I'm not going to tell you what games they are because they're games that we haven't really talked about at all yet. So I look forward to sharing those games with you in the future, but I'm excited about two play tests today. Yeah. And Joe, I mentioned Joe, our new employer, the only other full-time employee at Stonemaier Games other than myself. Joe started last Wednesday. That was his first day. And he's had his first full week here now. He might be listening to this now. I think he listens to some of these. And he's done a wonderful job. I just wanted to tip my cap to Joe because he's really been he's been great. Like you can like his job description is mainly customer service, but he does some other things too. His title is Director of Communications, and it's been the difference has already been noticeable for me. The things that I'm able to focus a lot more of my time on have already changed thanks to Joe. And he's been quick to pick up certain things, especially some bookkeeping stuff that I really don't enjoy, that he's going to take over. So I just wanted to say it's been a wonderful addition to have Joe on the Stonemaier Games team so far, and I look forward to a long future working with Joe. I'm looking at the comments over here. Chad says that he played Tzolk'in last night. This is a game that I recommend. I love Tzolk'in. I posted about it on Instagram the other day, in fact, because I got to play it at Game Night last Thursday. It looks like Chad got second place out of 4 players. That's awesome, Chad. Congratulations. Charlie says, which scythe expansion would you get if I could only get one? That's a tough one for me to answer, Charlie. You may have to look for the comments to see what other people reply in those regards. I mean, if you're looking for more of an ongoing narrative in Scythe, then I would go with The Rise of Fenris. If you're looking just to add like more stuff, I think Invaders from Afar is perfect for that because you get more player mats and you get 2 new factions. And if you're looking for something that's a little just different, the Wind Gambit could be for you. The Wind Gambit adds a new unit type, the airships, that add just a really interesting twist on the game. A lot more interaction if you want to, or you can just let your airship sit back at your home base and not do anything. It's fully up to you how much you want your airship to impact the game. Carol says that she just started reading the Red Rising series based on my recommendation. That's great. I'm glad you're giving that a try. That is one of my favorite book series of all time. I recently finished book 5 in the series. It's kind of split into 2 trilogies. The first trilogy is finished, and there's another trilogy that's ongoing right now. And book 5 was a monster of a book. It was a big book, and I really enjoyed it. Connor's joining us today from Inside Up Games. Connor, good to have you here. Connor posted the other day. I posted on my personal blog that I accidentally bought a $25 wedge of cheese. I intended to buy the cheese. I just didn't realize that it was $25. And Connor shared a story. Connor, you bought, I think Connor bought a ribeye. And after the ribeye had been packaged up, they gave him the price for the ribeye. And it was much, much more expensive than one would normally pay for a cut of meat. So it was kind of fun to see that little story. I think that was you that posted on my blog the other day. Josie Pekka says, will Joe be working in your kitchen, or are you thinking of getting an office yet? No, Joe will work from home. The vast majority of work that Joe will do is customer service over email, so and replacement parts. So he'll do that from his home office. Joe has a home office now, and Joe will meet with me 1 to 2 times a week. Definitely on Wednesdays when we have our weekly meeting, when we play test and do things like that, and oftentimes on Friday we'll probably do a meeting as well, where we one of Joe's responsibilities is to learn new games and teach them, play them with me, because I rarely have time to learn new games now, which I know is a bit of a luxury for me to have an employee do that, but it's part of Joe's job and something that I think I need as a designer. I need to continue to learn from designs from other publishers, something that I really, really enjoy. So probably end up meeting with Joe twice a week, and we'll just meet in my office here, and otherwise he'll work from home. Matt says, have I played Vindication yet? What are my thoughts on the rolling end game conditions? That is, where you start with 2, and every once in a while a new condition pops up, and if any of them is met, the game ends during the next round. Yeah, Matt, I did a My Favorite Mechanism video about Vindication probably maybe 6 months to a year ago. It's been a while since I played it. I did enjoy my play of it, and I think that might have been one of my favorite mechanisms, how the endgame condition is rolling and evolving, and how you have some amount of control over it. I thought that was a really neat part of the design. But yeah, check out the video. I can't remember what I said in the past, but look on YouTube for My Favorite Mechanism in Vindication, and you might see the same thing, the end of the game mechanism. And that same company that made Vindication is now on Kickstarter. I think they're actually in the last few hours. This is Orange Nebula with a game called Unsettled. It's a survival game. So they're doing more cool stuff. It's doing very well. I think they just got over $1 million, so they're doing great. I'm really happy to see them do that. And if Vindication is any indication, I'm sure Unsettled will be a really solid game as well. Connor says, I'm looking at potentially hiring an employee. What were the deciding factors in making that leap? Well, there are a few, Connor. You may have read them on my blog a couple weeks ago when I wrote about it. I would say one of the main things was that I had a lot of little tasks, and I still do. I have a lot of little tasks that I outsourced to different people to handle. And many of them I handled myself too, but some of them I outsourced to different people. And we accumulated enough of those types of responsibilities that we realized that we could add them all together into a full-time job, and also take a few things off my plate that I really don't enjoy, or that I'm not good at, or that can make me better at other aspects of my job if I didn't have to deal with certain things, and put them all in one person. So it was really an accumulation of things that added up to a full-time job, whereas before that we didn't really have that. We had a lot of little things that we could outsource to independent contractors, but not enough for another full-time employee. So that was the kind of the breaking point for us, in a good way, not in a bad way. I think there were a few other reasons too. Check out the blog entry on it. I think the article was, I'm no longer the only full-time employee at Stonemaier Games. Oh, and Connor says, in other words, what jobs were you able to hand off? So Joe's main so replacement parts are one. That was something that I wasn't doing. That was something that was handled by someone else on a part-time basis. Customer service is a big thing, and I'm still very involved in customer service, but Joe is getting all the customer service emails now, which really they add up quite a bit. Joe will do things like compile prototypes. Whenever I need a prototype made, he's going to do that. Like I'll design the prototype and he'll print and cut it. He'll handle the monthly bookkeeping, something that I really don't enjoy. Joe has experience with that, so he'll be doing that. I actually have his responsibilities list on my desk because I'm still kind of learning as I go what things Joe will handle and what things I will continue to handle. Joe is very detail oriented, so Joe will be an extra set of eyes whenever we receive a pre-production or mass production copy of a game. So he'll kind of be the first set of eyes, and then I will also see it before we approve it. Yeah, those are the main things. He has some other things too, but those are some of the big things. Corlin said, "Are you looking for people to work at Gen Con? If so, I would love to work at your booth." Thank you, Corlin. We don't really technically have a booth at Gen Con. MeepleSource basically has a booth, and they devote a lot of their booth space and organizational energy to Stonemaier Games, which is great. We have a great partnership with them. So technically, MeepleSource will have a booth that features Stonemaier Games products. And so if you are interested, please reach out to MeepleSource and let them know that you're interested in volunteering there. Matt says, "Any teases on what we might be seeing in those viticulture expansions you mentioned last week? More mechanisms, ways to get points, or alternative stuff like boards or visitor cards? What's it like as a designer balancing multiple designers on a single game expansion?" Yeah, Matt, those are great questions. Last week I basically mentioned that someone asked, "Are we going to put out a viticulture expansion? Is there anything in the works?" And I said that there is brainstorming in the works, a collaboration between multiple designers who have had ideas and who have executed those ideas as fan expansions for viticulture. And I basically have reached out to all of them and said, "Hey, let's work together and try to make something cool." With the main focus, one of the big things being that if we make a new viticulture expansion, I don't want it to just be another more stuff expansion. I love visitors from Rhine Valley. I love more visitors. They're great expansions, but we don't really need to do another expansion that's just like more visitor cards. So we're looking to put kind of a pretty big twist on viticulture while still retaining the core aspects of the game. And who knows, it could end up being a completely new game. It could be a sequel to viticulture. I don't really know because we have so many ideas bouncing around at this point. As for what's it like balancing multiple designers, that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out right now, because I think there's literally 5 designers, including myself, who are just kind of brainstorming on it right now. And we kind of need someone to take the lead, and that person will probably be me, which is fine. But I just have a lot of other projects that I'm managing right now. So, and it's tough to pick and choose like which elements from which designer should end up in the game, because I'm biased based on my experience with viticulture. So that part I'm navigating right now. Fernando says he's about to start his first Charterstone campaign with his wife. Any designer cool tips? Fernando, well, thank you for starting Charterstone. That's awesome to hear. We finally reprinted Charterstone, so we'll have more copies available in a few months. But you have a copy, so you don't need to worry about that. The main thing I would say is, even though it is a game that I don't think needs the FAQ, I think it does benefit the user experience to have the FAQ. So I would highly recommend going to our website and printing the Charterstone FAQ and looking at it after it tells you to look at it. I think that's really helpful, and should smooth out your experience. It should help you catch some things. Like it'll say, like, after game 1, did you make sure you actually did this thing, because maybe you missed it. So that type of thing. So my main tip is to use that FAQ. Jacques says, "Could you remind me of that website that pulls the list of games in your Board Game Geek collection and then asks you the series of which you would rather determine a ranking of those games?" What was that? Yeah, it's like Board Game Pub, Board Game Meeple, Pub Meeple. Does that sound right? Let's see, Pub Meeple ranking engine. Yeah, search Google for Pub Meeple ranking engine. It will come up there. Can't believe I remember that. I have a terrible memory. Okay, let's see. what else is happening here? So, fun personal thing. Megan and I just booked a trip to Alaska. We're going to go visit some friends in Fairbanks, Alaska, in the spring, and I'm really excited about it. This is the first time that we booked a trip, a big trip since New Zealand. And I learned through booking this trip that Alaska is really far away from St. Louis. It's essentially an international trip because it requires like a full day of travel to get there. And a lot of both flights will be overnight flights, which I don't think I've ever done other than international. I don't think I've ever done like a red-eye flight. But one of the flights, like the flight from Alaska, we get on the plane at like 1:20 a.m. or that's when we take off. Never done that before. But it should be a fun trip. And if any of you have ever been to Alaska, Fairbanks specifically, and you have any recommendations, feel free to let me know. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I have a few other things to talk about today, but I'll scroll down for questions a little bit more before I go into them. Santiago says, will there be a Wingspan South American expansion soon? Basically what we've said is that there will be, as long as there's interest, there will be an expansion for every continent in the world. We've already done North America, we've done Europe, and now we're going to do other continents. But I have not talked about the release schedule of those expansions, largely because it's subject to change, and it's not something that I typically reveal in advance. So someday, hopefully in like the next 4 years, we will have a South American expansion, but I'm not going to tell you exactly when in that time it's going to happen yet. Peter says he tried out the Food Chain Magnate expansion tonight. Oh, he's trying out the Food Chain Magnate expansion tonight. Have I tried many of the Splotter games? I really appreciate the minimal luck aspect. Food Chain Magnate and Bus were two of my favorites that I first played this year. Cool, yeah. Thanks for sharing this, Peter. I've played both of those games once, and I've also played The Great Zimbabwe once, and I think I've actually played one of their other ones once. Oh no, yeah, I have. I played Antiquity once. Maybe there may be another one that I'm forgetting. So yeah, I played a couple Splotter games. You're right that they are very low on luck. They are very thinky games. I think Bus is maybe the most streamlined, but all those other ones are very thinky games. They're a little heavier for the games that I typically gravitate towards, but I've learned a lot every time I played a Splotter game. There's a lot of very clever, innovative mechanisms in every Splotter game that I've played. Okay, let's see. I'll answer another question from Connor, then I'll talk about a few topics here. Connor says, another question about the employee. I've been talking about how this is our first full-time hire since myself. This is the end of Joe's first week as an employee at Stonemaier Games. He says, do I worry about the return on investment of an employee? It seems so hard to track for me, which is why I hesitate. Not really, no. I guess if it was a sales position, then yeah, I might look for that. But Joe's position is the director of communications. He's not doing sales for us. I guess some versions of directors of communications do sales and marketing. That's just not Joe's role. So it was sales oriented, maybe, yeah. It was hard to think of what the salary was, like how much is Joe's time worth? How much are these responsibilities worth? That was hard to think of, and so I did have to think about while determining Joe's salary and his compensation. But I basically just tried to be fair to him and had a good discussion with him about that. But mostly it was like I said, a compilation of various responsibilities that I thought could add up to roughly 40 hours a week to justify a 40-hour per week level salary. What else is going on? So I did some of my videos and blog posts over the last couple of days. I did my Sunday sit down was about simultaneous action games, which is a category that's fascinated me for a little while now, of games where players, there's either a phase of the game or the entire game where players just do stuff as they wish, and take as long as they want, and they just do it at the same time as other players, with two recent examples being Chocolate Factory and Fantastic Factories. So that was a fun video to do. Got some great comments about thoughts from different people about that. And my blog post the blog post the other day was about Starbucks rewards and a stretch goal system that I thought of, that I've seen other projects do, like parts of it, but not the whole thing, but different stretch goal system that's inspired by the Starbucks reward system, which I think is pretty clever. I think the Starbucks reward system is clever. We'll find out if anyone uses the system I propose to see if it actually is clever. And I also did a big blog post about game reviewers and how Stonemaier Games in 2020, how we are working with game reviewers, with one of my big new methods being that since I have so many reviewers requesting games now, that at certain times, instead of picking and choosing different reviewers, especially at the reprint stage of a game, I will instead send an email to around 20 or 30 reviewers, all of whom have requested a specific product. And I say, hey, if you want to review this product in the next couple of months, you can buy it from us at a huge discount. I offer them a huge, huge discount. So they still have to go in and actually spend a little bit of money on the product, mostly just shipping costs. But it also saves me the time of like inputting each reviewer's order one by one. And then sometimes I end up sending games to reviewers who already have it or they don't want it. So it saves me a lot of time. It puts the impetus on them to actually act on it and decide if that's a game they really want to review. That system has worked really well so far. And so if you're looking for not a great, but a one approach to reviewers, for your company, you might check out that method. Sapphire City Board Game Parlor is saying, when will Jamie create Jamie illustrated Wingspan promo card? So this is a reference to a little thing I did for this game parlor where Joe actually heard that they wanted they were interested in sketches of birds from me. I am not an illustrator, to use, I think, as prizes for a Wingspan tournament that they're hosting. I think it's a Wingspan tournament or event. And so I had like a minute to sketch a few birds, and I did so. So if you go to the Wingspan page right now, the Wingspan Facebook page, you can see what 2 30-second illustrations of birds in my hand look like. They are nowhere even close to the real illustrations in the game. Those are way, way better, but it was a fun little thing to do for you guys. Reed says, how's the Tapestry expansion coming along? I'm really happy with where it's coming along. It went through 3 blind play tests, and then I had like a kind of a fun cutting phase where I looked at everything in there and I said, what is really working well, what is really special, and what just needs to be cut. And so I cut some things, and then we entered the 4th wave of blind play testing. And every stage it seems to be getting better and better. One of the questions I ask when we do expansion play testing is, do you enjoy this? Do you enjoy the game more with the expansion or less? And over really the course of almost the entire blind play test for this expansion, the answers have been that they enjoy the game more with the expansion than before. So that to me is a mark of success, and that trend continues. So it's going really well, basically. Yeah, thank you for asking about it. George says, what's the difference between a designer and a developer when talking about making a game? I saw a lot of games which have both of them, like Everdell, and I was wondering from a design point of view. So I'll answer with my definition. I think people might use these terms in different ways, and it is different in like the board game industry versus the digital game industry. But a designer to me is the person who designs the game, who creates the game. They're the one who comes up with the idea, who creates the prototypes that they play test the game. They build a functional, fun game. But if that game isn't 100% ready, just in terms of mechanisms and fun, balance, and variability and all that stuff, and intuitive rules and all that, sometimes a designer will hand off a game to a developer for a little while, and that developer will take the game to the next level. They will make it even more balanced, even more fun, even more intuitive to learn and to remember, things like that. So the developer is not creating the original content. The designer is the one that's creating the content, who is forming not just the foundation for the game, they're building the house, and the developer is coming in and pointing out a few things that need to be improved. Developers take on different levels of involvement at times. Sometimes the developer will really take a game and do what they want with it for a little while and turn it into something that's even better. And sometimes they will just look at the game and play it a few times and offer some pointers. So it kind of depends on that. But there's a big delineating line between the designer and developer in terms of who is actually creating the content for the game, the core content for the game. And that is the designer. Let's see. So I talked about Joe's first week. I talked about that I have 2 play tests today for 2 games that I'm really excited about. I had a meeting yesterday. I don't do many meetings, but I did have a meeting with Greater Than Games yesterday. They do the fulfillment for our products. And we're looking for ways to have more consistency in the quality of their fulfillment of our games. So if you order a game from our web store and you live in the US, Greater Than Games is the company shipping the games to you. It's their warehouse, their fulfillment center that we outsource to handle that, because I work from here. I don't have a warehouse. I just have a home. And so we had a good meeting yesterday that I think will hopefully improve certain aspects of fulfillment in the future, especially as we had some pretty big fulfillments this year. We had Tapestry, where we received 10,000 orders in 32 hours, and that's a lot of games to fulfill. So they are not at that capacity at this point, but they're working towards it. And I think yesterday's meeting was a good step towards that. This isn't really relevant to you all that much, but I just want to let you know what was going on there. And actually, if you are still waiting for an order that you placed over the last few weeks and you are in the US, it's largely because they are catching up from the holidays, and they are trying to work on expectations for how much can actually be shipped during the holiday season. We're learning from that. Chad says, are there any mechanisms that you consider old and not fun? Something that is not necessarily fun. So Chad's example is rolling dice to move or feeding your workers in a worker placement game. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I rarely enjoy feeding workers in a worker placement game. I'd put up with it in Tzolk'in because it's such a big part of the game, and I love Tzolk'in anyway. But it's just something that I just don't. That is not as fun to me as other mechanisms in the game. That's why in like Viticulture, you hire your worker, but you don't actually have to feed them after that. You've already hired them; they're going to feed themselves. Any mechanisms that I consider old and not fun. Yeah, I'm sure there are, Chad. Let me think if I can think of any of them offhand. One that I think is becoming, no, I won't say that because that's changed. Well, one that I mention from time to time is the type of phase in a game where, or the use of phases in the game that requires a game manager to say, okay, everyone, we are now in the farming phase. Everyone do their farming actions. And then you move on to the next phase and you're like, okay, everyone, we are now in the collecting resources phase. Everyone do their collecting resources actions. And you go through these phases one by one, instead of just letting players choose on their turn, okay, I want to farm right now, or I want to collect resources, or I want to collect resources 2 turns in a row, and I want to neglect this other thing. I think that type of game flows a lot better than having a game manager to say, like, this is the time that everyone's going to do this one thing. Especially since I think that removes you from the immersion of the game. I know that is not true for all games. That can definitely vary from game to game, but that is something that I think is a little outdated. I've seen it a lot more in older games and a lot less in newer games. Amin says, in my country, the only board games available are the classic ones like Monopoly and Scrabble. How does Hasbro manage to put Monopoly in every toy store around the world while there is such a boom in the board game industry? Can you try to explain this? Is it a distributor issue? Why is Monopoly still well, actually, I don't know how popular Monopoly actually is, but you're right that Hasbro manages to put it in stores around the world. I think part of it is that Hasbro is a very big company, and Monopoly is a game that is known to a lot of people. And I don't know. That's a good question. I don't quite know who is buying Monopoly now. Like I haven't gone through the experience of like having kids and not being a gamer, but maybe that's part of that process. Like if you're not a gamer and you have kids and you try to remember and you want to buy a game for them, maybe Monopoly is just the game you think of. I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. Maybe someone in the comments will have some thoughts about that. Right now we're in the middle of watching The Witcher on Netflix, which has been confusing and interesting and somewhat entertaining. We definitely have stumbled through a few episodes where we're trying to figure out what's happening. The show doesn't seem to spend much effort explaining why things are happening or what's happening or what like order they're happening in. But I think it's good. I think I'm enjoying it. But I'm curious what you all think. Are you watching The Witcher? And does it, for someone who knows nothing about The Witcher video game series, or actually I know a little bit about the video game series. I haven't played it, but The Witcher 3 is a fascinating game to research. But that game and the book series, if you don't know anything about those, does the Netflix series eventually make sense and come together, or not? We're 4 episodes in, so we just did have an episode that explained certain things, not overtly, but we kind of figured them out. But yeah, I'm curious what you think about that. Also, I'm reading my book right now is in the Brent Weeks Lightbringer series. It's book 5. It's what I think is the final book in that series. If you're looking for an epic, massive trilogy, or not trilogy, fantasy series that is longer than a trilogy, and that I think is over. So if you like to start series that definitely have a specific conclusion, I'd highly recommend the Lightbringer series from Brent Weeks. I've really, really enjoyed it. And it's amazing to see, like right now, Megan is actually reading book 1, and she'll share like little things that are funny to her, amusing to her in that book. And I don't spoil anything, but it's really interesting to hear like what's happening in book 1 and to remember that, because it is so different how the characters and the world have evolved in interesting and organic and unexpected ways in book 5, up to book 5. So really, really cool sense of progression and character involvement in this series. Chad has a fun question here. He says, do I believe that Sasquatch could and or does exist? You know, I think if Sasquatch actually did exist, we probably would have found him or her by now, or it by now. So probably not. No, I would, but do I want it to? Yeah, I love the idea of these mythical, legendary creatures like Sasquatch and Yetis and the Loch Ness Monster. I love the idea that those things could exist. I love the idea of things beyond our comprehension existing in the world. So I hope Sasquatch exists, but I doubt it does. Justy Pekka says, when are we going to see penguins in Wingspan? I think in one of the expansions that's already out, I think there's a puffin. But you're right. I don't think we have penguins yet. Someday we might do. I think I've talked about how I'm not going to tell the order of the expansions, but most likely the Antarctica expansion, if we do one, will be last, and it'll be pretty much all penguins. So if you want that to happen, keep supporting Wingspan for a couple years, and we will make the Antarctica expansion happen eventually. Matt says, which Stonemaier game am I the best at? Meaning, which game fits in with how your brain processes strategy the most? What is the process of designing games with other people's cognitive processes in mind? Let me answer the first question first, because that's a very different question. What game am I best at? Like, if I had to challenge someone at a Stonemaier game, probably viticulture. I'm pretty good at viticulture. Then Matt says, what is the process of designing games with other people's cognitive processes in mind? Honestly, it's one of the most difficult things to do in game design, because I have strong biases of things that are enjoyable and fun to me that are not enjoyable or fun to other people. And so I really have to pay attention to playtester data and look for patterns in what people are saying when they say this thing is fun, this thing isn't fun, this is frustrating, this isn't frustrating, and to not instinctively say, oh no, but that actually is fun, you're just not seeing the fun yet. I have to really listen to those people and recognize those patterns in playtesting and acknowledge that what's fun for you might be really different than what's fun for me. His question continues, is it simply playtesting with lots of different people? So yes. Or do I have to intentionally step back in the early design process to consider how others might approach the game? I do. I mean, I try to keep people in mind throughout the process, but most of that comes through playtesting. Yeah. Angel says, a friend and I want to test and show our prototype. What are the best places or conventions to do it? There are events called Protospiels and Unpub events that are specifically designed around inviting playtesters and designers to playtest their games. So that would be my top recommendation. I don't know where you're located, Angel, but Protospiel and Unpub are great events. And also, if you're ever in St. Louis in September, we host an event called the Stonemaier Games Design Day, which is very similar to those events, where we host a bunch of designers, a bunch of playtesters, and they get to playtest their game a couple times that day. You'll probably see mentions of this on our e-newsletter in a few months. Sa says, we just played the European expansion for Wingspan. He said it's a nice addition, but he would like more interaction between players. So it sounds like, so when we use this term interaction, let's use it correctly here, because there's plenty of interaction in Wingspan between players, plenty of reasons to pay attention to other players, plenty of ways to impact them. I think what you're talking about is conflict. You want more conflict between players. And that really isn't in the spirit of Wingspan. It is possible someday, like you mentioned here, adding more adding predators that go on other maps. That is something that we've considered, because that's an interesting form of interaction where you are impacting the other player. Maybe you're adding something that's a little disruptive to their player mat, but at the same time, if you're adding a bird to their player mat or a predator and filling up that card slot, then you're also making their core ability in that row better. So that is, I'm glad that you mentioned that as an example, because that is probably the limit to the type of conflict we would add in the game, or things where you're actually disrupting another player's strategy. It has to add something positive if you're going to do something even just a little bit negative. You may have noticed this in the Wingspan expansion, where there is a few cards where you can steal a food token from another player, but when you do, they get to pick a food token from the bird feeder. So it's something a little negative, but also something positive. And sometimes that can even really help them out. Maybe they didn't really even want that food. Maybe they wanted one from the bird feeder even more. So I think you will continue to see those types of interactions in future expansions. I'm going to get a little water here real quick. Dave says, when writing and designing rulebooks, how do I balance having a fast, smooth onboarding experience versus making sure the players have enough information examples to play the game? What's the biggest lesson you've learned from writing rules for Stonemaier games? That's a great question, Dave, and that is a very tough balance. The onboarding process is so important to me, as you probably saw in Tapestry. I want streamlined rules that players can learn. And really, it's not just writing the rulebook, but it impacts the design of the game itself. If I find whenever I look at a game and I see that we have a whole page of rules for one little concept, we just design around it. We get rid of that concept. It's not worth that many rules for one little thing that barely impacts anything in the game. But then, as you say, there's also the side of making sure that all the questions that players might have are covered. And so, for example, one thing in Tapestry that was a goal of mine is I wanted the Tapestry cards themselves to be self-sufficient. I didn't want them to require a reference guide that you had to look at. I didn't even want the tech cards to need that either. And the tech cards technically don't, but we did. We had an extra side of like the reference guide, so we did put the tech cards on there. But so I would say the biggest lesson though is that when I do have that goal, when I use something like the Tapestry cards that have text on them, in such a way that I don't want them to require a reference guide, I need to do an even better job at that. I need to make sure those cards are perfectly clear in all forms of different interactions that those cards might have. Otherwise, we end up with a lot of questions on BoardGameGeek. Tyler says, have I thought of doing a Wingspan expansion with Birds of New Zealand? Yeah, Tyler, yeah, definitely. Yeah, one of the expansions that we are going to make is for Oceania, which includes New Zealand and Australia primarily, and also some other islands. That's one that we definitely will make someday. Gerald says, can I talk a bit about a deck of cards with abilities powers, about why they should not all be equally as good and why some should be weak and some powerful? Yeah, let's see. So it really depends on the game here, I think, in my opinion. And it depends on how players are acquiring those cards. Are they acquiring them from a face-down deck randomly, or are they selecting them from a card row of several face-up cards? And I think that's the key there. If you have several face-up cards, you can balance them with cost a little bit, but because you're giving all players those options, you can have different levels of power on those cards. I do like to balance, like in Space Base, I think they do a good job of balancing the card powers with the card costs, but they also combine that with having all those cards be available and visible. You can see all the cards that you're acquiring. And so you know that if you don't buy this card, that another player might buy it, and that's your fault that you didn't buy that card. But the main thing I've learned that actually wasn't quite in your question here is that if you do have cards, especially cards that you're randomly acquiring, that they should serve a function at different points in the game. So they should be good. They should have a good utility early on in the game, in the middle of the game, and late in the game, depending on when exactly you draw them. That's a design lesson I learned, especially from Viticulture. The original version of Viticulture had some visitor cards that just weren't good if you drew them late in the game, or just weren't good if you drew them early in the game. Bruce says, I know that the first batch of Wingspan upgrade neoprene player mats were printed slightly too small. Any word on a reprinting of these mats at full size? Yeah, we are working on a reprinting, and I think we're probably looking at the second quarter of 2020. That's my rough estimate right now of when they'll be ready. Sonia says that she was learning Thunderstone Quest last night. How do I feel about the first part of your turn, making 2 blind decisions, choosing dungeon or village, then at village, putting your pawn on a space before seeing your cards? Huh. You do all that before seeing your cards. That's interesting. Because in deck builders, you usually draw your hand of cards at the end of your turn so that you can start to plan ahead for your turn before then. I haven't played Thunderstone Quest, or at least not this version of it. I played Thunderstone, but not Thunderstone Quest. And in general, one thing that I really like in games is when you can plan ahead for your turn, and when you don't get surprises right at the beginning of your turn that you have to then reevaluate everything. So on the surface, based on what you've described here, that isn't a design decision I think I would have made. I would have let players make that decision, not blind. I would have them have their full hand of cards and then make the decision at the beginning of their turn based on the cards in their hand. Carlos says, a lot of people complain about the cost of board games. As a small-scale game designer and developer, I understand actual cost and consumer price. He says 99% of people are clueless. I don't know if that's true, but you can say that. Would you be able to shine a light on everything that goes on behind the curtains and how costly everything really is? So I have a lot of blog entries about this. I will give you a very brief overview of why games are priced the way they do, or the way they are. And it's because here's a rough example. So say you have a game that costs $20 to manufacture, roughly $20 to manufacture. Typically, that game will have a $100 price point, which is 5 times $20. And the reason for that is when you sell that game to a distributor, the distributor gets a 60% discount typically. And so a distributor is buying this game that costs you $20 to make for $40, giving you $20 worth of profit. And that $20 worth of profit is just barely enough to then reprint the game because the game costs $20 to make. So if you want to create a sustainable game that you can reprint multiple times, you need to be like, that's like the minimum that you need to earn to actually afford to reprint it. Those prices don't include direct sales when you have a much better margin. And there are companies that only sell direct, and so they don't even care about the MSRP. They don't care about factoring in the distributor discount. They just sell what price they need it to be, the price that they need to have a sustainable company and reprints. But that is the main reason that board games are priced the way they are. The manufacturing cost times around 5 or 6 to determine the MSRP. We use, at Stonemaier Games, we do use that 5 times multiplier. Yeah. That's my brief overview. There's also a lot more about that on my blog if you're interested in digging deeper into that. Chunk says, what's the best way for me to sell my fully developed game to a publisher? So my suggestion here would be to pick a few publishers that are accepting submissions and that you really like, that you would think you would enjoy working with, and that have games kind of in the same realm. Maybe not the exact same game. Like if you have a birding game, don't submit it to us. We already have a game about birds. But look for games in that realm, games that feel like a game from those publishers, and go to those publishers' websites, look at their submission guidelines, and submit the game to them. People are talking about The Witcher now, talking about the 3 different, there are 3 timelines. All right, so we gotta keep track of 3 different timelines, and we don't know which one is which. The Dice Odyssey says, have I considered making a space-themed starship game of some sort? After seeing the space-themed tiles and tapestry, I was curious if you were going to do a sci-fi game like that. Currently, no, I don't have a sci-fi game set in space. I am working on a few different games that use science fiction, futuristic themes or universes, but not set in space. Some people are talking about Monopoly now. Some interesting opinions here about Monopoly. And The Witcher, still The Witcher here. Tim says, did I watch The Expanse Season 4? Tim, I love The Expanse books. I've read all the books, actually, except maybe the most recent novella. I don't think I've read that one yet. But I enjoyed the series. I think I watched the first 2 seasons of it. But for some reason, it just didn't grab me to keep on continuing, which I know is terrible to say because it is a wonderfully produced show. They've done a great job with it. But I don't know. I was happy with the books, so I didn't keep watching the show. So no, I haven't watched season 4. So I mentioned, I'm getting some comments now because I mentioned that Megan and I are going to take a trip to Alaska in the spring. So people are recommending some things here. Stan has some great recommendations, it looks like. He says he would recommend a tour through the Denali National Park and whale watching. Chad says, what is my preference, pen or pencil? Do I have a go to make a pen or pencil? Definitely pencil. I always have a pencil right on my desk, and I do like this brand. What is this? This is it's a pencil. Pentel. It's a Pentel pencil. Just a normal electric pencil, or not electric, mechanical pencil. Amin says, are any of your games sold in large department stores like Walmart? If you've ever been rejected by a retailer or distributor, what were their motives? Did they ever tell you, we don't think your games will sell here? Walmart.com does sell our games, but it's not a direct relationship. We sell to a distributor and they sell to Walmart.com. I don't think our games are found in Walmart stores themselves. Have we been rejected by a retailer or distributor? Well, not outright. I mean, I don't think rejections are all that abrupt in the industry. It's more like they just don't buy stuff for a while. So if something isn't selling for a distributor, they just might not buy it for a little while. That's been my experience so far. They usually don't tell me why, but usually the reason is they're probably not getting orders from their retailers. And so they don't want to carry something that they're not selling. Tony says, I know you love, well, there's a nice comment for that. Joseph says, you should make a few promos for Wingspan that are my 1 minute drawings. Love seeing those. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. That could be a fun idea. We don't do many. We haven't done really. Have we done any promo? No, we did the Swift Start promos. Yeah, but we haven't done any other just kind of for fun promos yet for Wingspan. We will someday. Tony says, I know you love On Tour because I picked it up based off your recommendation. What's your go-to band type, rock, country, etc.? And do you have a band name you use every time you play? I just go with whatever random mat I get, and the band name really varies on my mood. It changes every game. I don't remember the ones that I've chosen so far. But in terms of music that I actually listen to in real life, I don't listen to a lot of music, but I would say like kind of alternative pop style is what I really enjoy. Chance says that the lighting looks way better now. Thank you, Chance. Yeah, Megan's brother is a lighting expert. So when he visited us right before Christmas and helped out with a few things, like there's extra blinds on the windows over here. I'm supposed to kind of close those windows back there for the most part. And I have a new camera too. So I'm glad that's looking a lot better. I'm curious, are you all hearing like a high-pitched sound in the microphone? So you could hear, like, mute the video for a second and then unmute it and see if you can hear it. But it was showing up on my YouTube videos, and so I like unplugged the mic and replugged it in, restarted the computer a few times. I don't know what it is, but hopefully you're not hearing it now. But let me know if you are. I can't hear it because I can't hear myself. Beth says that she tried the beginner startup in Wingspan last night. She's never seen a concept like that in any game so far, and must say it's a pretty cool and worked pretty well. That's great to hear, Beth. I'm glad to hear that. That's referring to the Swift Start promo pack in Wingspan that's now included in copies of Wingspan. And if you already have Wingspan and don't have the promo pack, you can buy it from our web store. It's designed to help teach players how to play Wingspan without kind of like guides them through the first few turns of the game. Josh says, did any games from 2019 surprise you? I was really surprised with how much fun I had with Cthulhu Death May Die. Yeah, I've heard some great things about that. The cooperative podcast I listened to, the Co-op Cast, they have raved about it. So I definitely need to try that. And Josh, yeah, the games that surprised me in 2019. Let me look at my top list of 2019 to see which ones caught me completely off guard. I'll pull it up right now. So a few of my favorite games. Which ones really surprised me? So the list is from 10 to 9 is Trade on the Tigris, Clank Legacy, Cartographers, The Shipwreck Arcana, On Tour, Dice Throne, Sushi Roll, QE, Just One, and The Quacks of Quedlinburg. I would say Just One is probably the biggest surprise because who would think that a cooperative party game would be near the top of one of my lists? That's definitely not something that I thought would happen. The Shipwreck Arcana was just completely off my radar. I don't think I realized anything about it until I played it and realized how much I loved it. Clank Legacy, I had no idea that was going to happen this year. I had no idea they were doing a legacy version, and I've been loving playing that. And Trade on the Tigris, kind of a real-time, simultaneous trading negotiation game, civilization game, kind of. That caught me off guard too. That was kind of the surprise, even when I was compiling the list. Surprised by how much I really enjoyed that one. Yeah. I need to add Cthulhu Death May Die to my Geekway list. I'll make a note about that. Death May Die. Kind of a dark name, isn't it? Linda says, what about the issue of combining the expansion pack of Wingspan with the main game and then being birds of different continents? That could not happen in nature. The beautiful thing about the game is that everything up until then could happen in nature. So I guess a few different perspectives here, Linda. One is that you're right, it couldn't happen in nature. But Wingspan doesn't take place just out in nature. It takes place kind of in a bird sanctuary, a reserve for birds, where you could feasibly put different birds together in the same area, but maybe they'll hang out in different habitats, because there are different birds in different parts of the world that hang out that live in the forest of those regions. At the same time, I see where you're coming from. The theme of Wingspan is really, really important. And if that's really important to you, you don't have to mix the birds together. You can just play with the expansion birds by themselves. And then play with the core game birds. When you're feeling North American, you can play with those. When you're feeling European, you can just play with the European birds. The only downside there, of course, is that there are not enough birds in the European expansion to play 4 or 5 player games. You can only play a 2 or 3 player game with that. Connor says, do I like creative first player selection in games or pick a first player wording? You know what I think I've enjoyed? I've enjoyed games that say either randomly select a first player or choose the last player to do something creative or silly. I like the choice there. Yeah, most of the time we're just going to choose randomly, but it is fun sometimes to have those fun first player mechanisms. Like in Tzolk'in, actually, we were playing this the other day. The first player in Tzolk'in is the last player to sacrifice something. So right away, that question, I don't know, it leads to maybe a very short social discussion, and it ties immediately into the theme of the game. But if you want, you can just randomly select it, and that's fine too. Dan says, did you ever finish the Seafall campaign? And if so, did you enjoy it and would you recommend it? Dan, we made it through, I believe, 5 games of Seafall. I'm glad I played it, but we weren't interested in continuing after 5 games. So I don't think that's anywhere close to the entire campaign. And it wasn't that we didn't want to finish. It was just that the core mechanisms of each individual game of Seafall were pretty arduous. Like we were taking maybe 6 or 7 turns per player per game, and they were like 3-hour games. I don't want to play a 3-hour game where I'm only taking 6 turns. It's just not enough action. So I'm sorry to say this about a game, but I don't think I would recommend it. If you're looking for a legacy game right now that involves exploration, go with Clank Legacy. Clank Legacy has been a wonderful explorative experience. And also Pandemic Legacy Season 2 has a lot of exploration and is a lot more refined than Seafall. Joel Monica says, curious how many copies of your own games do you own or keep? Pretty much one copy of each game. I think just one. Yeah. I have a shelf of my games in the other room. Yeah, I think it's just one game of one copy of each of our games. Keith says he'd love to see my 1 minute drawing of Scythe. Oh yeah, maybe I should do 1 minute drawings for each of our games. That might be a fun little thing to do. Chunk says, would Stonemaier be interested in a game focused on buy, sell, trade items to profit while collecting items, similar to garage sale, thrift, or eBay seller, flip stuff and cash out to win? I don't know. It's hard to say based on that description, but if you have an interesting economy in your games that or an auction mechanism that's a lot of fun and that's innovative, I'm open to it. Based on that description, I can't say that I would love it or wouldn't love it, but I'm open to it. Simon says, what's your opinion on Fred Henry's statement from Monolith about Kickstarter funding goals? The new Conan funding goal is set at $700,000. I think he posted it in early December. I'm not familiar with that statement. I'm not sure what it is, Simon. If you send me a link, I'm happy to check it out. Okay, sorry, just reading comments here. And I don't think I have any topics to cover. I've talked about how I have 2 playtests today. I had a good meeting with our fulfillment center the other day. I'm going to Alaska. My recent videos were about simultaneous action games, Starbucks rewards, and game reviewers. Those last 2 are blog posts. Watching The Witcher right now. I'm reading the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, book 5. And Joe's first week as a full-time employee at Stonemaier Games has gone really well. Really happy with what he's done. So those are all my topics. And so we can round out with a few more questions here before I take off and prepare for these playtests. Seth says, have I read Playing at the World by John Peterson, a great read by an RPG historian about the evolution of the game industry? Playing at the World. No, I haven't read that, but I'm going to make a note of it. Playing at the World. Thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, I'll check that out after I get off this video. And thank you. I'm hearing a few of you, or reading a few of you commenting, saying that you are not hearing the high-pitched sound. So that means that it's either no longer happening, or it's relegated to my other video recording software that I use for YouTube. So that's good to know. Thank you for letting me know. Charles says, what are you spying out the window with that chair? It looks like someone sits there often looking out. That's a good. It does look like that is just a chair that sits right near the window. That is for my cats. My cats like to sit on that chair near the window. They take turns on it. Okay, I'm just reading some nice comments here. And let's see, last question. Oh, maybe a few more questions. Carlos says, would I be able to tell us more about the playtesting process? Carlos, you'll get the deepest dive answer if you look on our website for how to design a tabletop game. Look up for that section on the Stonemaier Games website. There's a lot of detail there about it. But in very brief, the playtesting process for me is I start with a lot of local playtesting, oftentimes with my co-founder and now with Joe, our other full-time employee, where we will playtest the game a number of times until it's fun and functional. Then I'll bring in other friends and have them playtest the game with me locally. And then after the game is really, I think, fun and functional and fairly balanced, I will send it out to blind playtesters, where I'll ask blind playtesters to play the game 3 times over the span of a few weeks. I pay them a little bit of money to do this, and they offer both anecdotal and data-driven feedback. I take that feedback, I make changes, I playtest it to see how those changes impact the game, I revise a few things, and then I put it through another wave of blind playtesting, and usually I repeat that around 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 waves of blind playtesting. That's in general what our process looks like. Connor says, what is one activity or site that you look forward to in Alaska? The Northern Lights are a big thing. I'm hoping that we can just like walk outside every night and just enjoy seeing the aurora, which I think should be incredible. I'm also looking forward to maybe doing dog sledding, as long as I make sure that the dogs are happy about it. And I want to see just like hiking in nature, seeing beautiful things that I don't get to see in St. Louis, doing the things that I want to do there. Rob says, when will a Wingspan be available again? Rob, on our website, we say mid-February. But we might have some copies available later this week. So make sure if you want to buy directly from us to sign up on our web store for a back-in-stock notification. Marcel says, is Stonemaier interested in making games based on popular IPs? I was once interested in Red Rising. Is this still a thing? For the right IP, yeah. If it's an IP that I'm really passionate about, or that I think would translate really well into a game and also do justice to the original fan base of that IP, yes, it's something I could be interested in. One last question from Connor here. He says, ignore if too personal. Have you and Megan talked about kids? You seem like you'd be a great dad. That's nice of you to say. I don't know if I'd be a great dad. I think I'm okay. I'm an okay cat dad, but no, I don't think we're going to have kids. We're not interested in having kids. But I applaud people who take that approach. Just not for us. On that note, I'm going to sign off and maybe go say hi to my cats and remind them how good of a cat papa I am. And you all have a great day. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for your questions. And if you have any further questions, the best place to post them is on YouTube. All right. Thanks.